Welcome back to Legends in the Making. In today's episode, we're exposing one of the most dangerous myths sold to leaders, athletes, and parents alike, the myth of motivation. If you've ever felt like you're inconsistent, if you've ever wondered why you keep starting strong but finishing nowhere, then this one's for you. And I love this quote. You weren't built to be motivated, you were built to be anchored. So really think about this. When we think about motivation, mastery isn't fueled by hype. It's anchored in devotion, repetition, and identity. Motivation may start the journey, but only mastery gets it finished. So let's jump right in. And when we think about what are really the pain points that we come up against here, and we live in a self-help world that's created a dopamine addiction. We've also live in a world that we want somebody to just tell us what to do to fix the problem. Like there's a one size fits all solution. And the reality is there isn't a one size fits all. It is discipline and finding out what works for us to really make our dreams come alive. I mean, we all love that hype, that motivation, but it's like once you've had that hype and motivation, how do you carry that in to who you are and what you're meant to do? And that's where the magic really happens, is that transition point between the inspiration and the actual action. And most of us love the inspiration. Even we see it in corporate America when you go to work conferences. It's like, we got to get people hyped up, and you get them hyped up at these leadership conferences, have guest speakers, whatever. And then you send them back to their jobs, back out into the field. And pretty soon, all that momentum and all that time that you spent just fizzles out, because there's no system, there's no process, there's no integration. Like that's the real work that's meant to do, not these hype campaigns, but it's the true integration of how do you make whatever you're hearing part of what you then do. How do you translate that? And that is the work of discipline. That's work of the routines that you come up with that help you stay consistent even when you don't feel like doing them. I believe, and we believe at Blueprint to Blue Chip, success should feel exciting, new, and empowering every day. But the reality is it's actually driven by repetition. It's about doing the same thing over and over and over again, even when you don't see the result. When I think of athletes who show up on fire for week 1 and then goes you in week 3, or is ready to be off the team, or, it's like, wow, they're gung-ho at the beginning of the season, and midway through, they're tired and exhausted. And it's like those ebbs and flows, the roller coaster really is a reflection of discipline and the routines that they set up for themselves to ensure that they win daily. It's about daily small wins. It's not about the big wins that we like to see. It's about, how do I show up day in and day out relentlessly in pursuit of who I am, who I'm supposed to be, and what I'm supposed to accomplish. I will watch and I work with numerous athletes and leaders. And it's like, you'll start a morning routine on Monday, and then by Thursday, it's abandoned. So it's like, yay, my motivation. Or I see this a lot in the fitness industry when it comes to, even in Blueprint to Blue Chip, when we talk about food and fueling our bodies. Pardon me. And the workouts that we need to do. And ultimately, what happens is they start out strong, and then by the end of the week or maybe the following week, now we've got the Oreos creeping back in, the M&Ms, you name it. It's like I was good for 3 days and then I fell off. It's like, how do you create system routines and habits that can last day in and day out? And if you do happen to fall off, because we are human, how do you quickly get back on track? And, you know, parents, I see this too with parents that set high standards, but can't enforce them when it gets hard. You literally sometimes, and I'm a parent, you feel like you're negotiating with a terrorist occasionally. And I mean that very lovingly. I love both of my kids, but it's like, wow, like, how do we have a conversation? They feel heard and seen as an individual and as a growing young adult, but also set the standard of my expectations, knowing that I am still their parent. I'm still their mom. So a lot of times people are not stuck because they're lazy or they're stuck because they lack motivation. They're stuck because they didn't learn how to create the habits instead of chasing the hype. And if you're chasing the hype, it is extremely hard to maintain that. I can relate to this all the time. This is something I myself, doing this work, leading this work, have to do daily with my own self of what's the first thing that happens when I wake up? How do I get myself into the state that I want to be in? And my morning always starts with meditation, with prayer, with alignment before my feet ever hit the floor, even if it's for 5, maybe 10 minutes. Like once the alarm goes off, it's not that it's like I got to jolt out of bed. It's like, okay, now that I'm awake, I'm going to spend some time connecting in with who do I want to be? Where do I want to go? What needs to get done today that has the highest and greatest impact for everyone around me? How can I be in service and do a really good alignment and a really good check-in? And then I like to have a little coffee, do a little bit of reading, get into just, okay, now I'm going to go work out. This is the rhythm. This is the time my appointments start. But I start my whole day with a list of things that have to be done for me to get me into my best state of being before I ever start to think about putting the oxygen mask on anybody else. And so that's where the work and the mastery begins, is what is your routine and what do you do? And I notice when I don't follow a routine, things get very out of whack and it becomes very hard for me to manage. And then I have the self-doubt and all these other things creep in because I haven't kept myself trained and in a state of this is repeatable over and over and over again. And if people tell you they don't fall off the wagon, they're completely wrong. And my routine is going to be different from your routine. That's going to be different from somebody else's routine. There is not a one size fits all. I just want to keep repeating that. There is no one size fits all for anybody. So you have to find what works for you and establish that, because that's where you really have mastery. Mastery becomes the solution, the repeated day in and day out, moment by moment habits of things that I do that make me feel aligned and whole and complete and at peace with myself that's what I'm truly focused on. And there is not one recommendation from a coach, from a podcast, from a planner, none of that gets me aligned and moving in the right direction. Those behaviors start with me and coming up with my own routine throughout the day. Same at the end of the day. How do I close out the end of my day so then I have a beautiful way to start my next day? Like, Everything is about rhythm and routine. And we think that discipline can be very boring, but there is a reason why structure is so important for us. It's why, as parents, when we have little babies, we get them on a routine. Because when we have them on a routine, life becomes much more smooth. When the child knows when I'm going to be napping, when I'm going to be going to bed, when's bath time, there becomes a rhythm. There's a cadence to it. And so finding what that is so important for you, because that's where mastery happens, is in your daily moment by moment habits. And so the truth is, motivation is fleeting. It's kind of an emotional fuel. It's a feeling. It's like, oh, yay, I feel great. Devotion is identity based. It's who you are when no one's watching. That's the discipline. That's the character. That's the integrity. What am I doing when nobody's watching? Or, a lot of times what throws me off is when I'm around other people. And I do great when I'm by myself, but when I have other people around, it's like, how do I stay as disciplined? What does this look like for me? And to still follow that, because that honors me. And their system and their process may be completely different. What I will tell you is the top elite, the top 1%, aren't the most inspired people. They're the most disciplined. They're the most anchored into who they are and who they need to be. And that's where the power becomes. When you can teach yourself, but then you can also teach your children. The mastery of being successful is in your routine, is in your habits. And if you can start them young and they can really start to understand the rewards of having tools like that, it's amazing to see what they can accomplish. Mastery is not sexy. It's definitely sacred, though, because once you get mastery, once you get to the place where it starts to become automatic, that's when you know you've really arrived, because you've created the systems, tools, and processes to get you to that sacred place. And you show up even when you don't feel like it. It just becomes, this is who I am. This is the routine that connects me in to my highest self. This is the routine that delivers the best to everybody else. So the most accomplished people are the most disciplined, because they've built it in who they are. And that's the magic. Motivation might be the whisper, but mastery is the echo. So do you want to hear the whisper, or do you want to hear the echo? And do you want to do the work that gets you there? But understanding all the things that you need to do in order to get there, that's the work that has to be done. It's really easy to say, like, oh, just go do this. And I listen to a lot of stuff like that, which again is kind of that motivation, that hype, but then it's the how. How do I do that? And this is what the 1% do that are different. They anchor to identity, not emotion. So who am I becoming replaces how do I feel today? It's not about your feelings. It's who am I supposed to be and what am I supposed to be doing? And am I doing what needs to be done? They also build systems. They don't build hype. They follow a rhythm. They follow a routine. It's not about excitement. You'll hear stories where people could eat the same thing day in and day out for decades, because that was what drove optimal performance. How many of us could do that? Probably not very many. Like, here's my system, and it doesn't matter what's happening. This is how I'm following it. And you create enough structure to be able to follow it. You also can embrace the boring. Repetition is a spiritual practice. It is essential. There is beauty in being able to do something over and over and over again with discipline and not question it. Like, that says a lot about you if you can wake up, go through the same motions, do the same things, be consistent in who you are, deliver consistently. That's magic. So ask yourself, if I did the unsexy thing for 90 days, what would my life look like? Journal it. Decide if hype has been costing you breakthroughs. What are the unsexy things? What are the daily disciplined ritual things that you need to do day in and day out for the next 90 days? And if you did those, how different would your life look? If this landed with you, it's not about the hype. It's about finding the discipline to root into this universe who you truly are. And I just continue to invite you deeper. So if you are a parent athlete that wants to have a more disciplined routine for yourselves as well as your athlete, book a call, reach out. I offer 5 days of coaching in a mini challenge that's a reset. It's free. I ask that you make a donation to a nonprofit. 5 days, 5 hours of coaching, completely on me for making a donation to my favorite nonprofit to help you start to get the systems, tools, and processes to align and become disciplined and execute. So again, I will include the link below, and I can't look forward to working with you. So your legacy won't be built in moments of hype. It will be built in the moments you show up without applause.